Welcome to the Programmatic Society, a show created by Michel Gevelier and produced by the SOCIETIES.MEDA. I'm your host, Hossein, running the show in the UK with my wonderful guests today, Pierre Naggar and James Booth. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming. This time my guests luckily don't have too far to come. And today, our topic is entrepreneurship and digital advertising, or you guys have been around for a while, and if you look at the past 2 decades of edtech, strangely I'm too young to know everything about that time. I can say this with good consciousness. So, how was your experience getting into that business? You with your experience, Pierre, from smaller companies like Blue Lithium, who got acquired, and you built companies from the beginning, right?
Yeah, not deliberately. I think it's fair to say that with Tango Zebra, that was probably more an accident than deliberate. We were a bunch of musicians trying to solve how to put audio onto the internet back in the day when it was all narrow bandwidth, dial-up modems and beep 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 beep, all that stuff. And we were trying to we look at the internet and wonder why it was such a boring environment. So that was our way in. It was how might we put audio on the internet in the mid-90s?
Audio. So
audio, yeah. So we started with audio, and we came up with a solution for making audio work when there wasn't any bandwidth. Technically, we shouldn't have been able to do it, but we sort of created a sequencing system. And then once we got that working, we then added images to it, and that became a multimedia sort of conveyor belt sequencing multimedia tool. And then it was a case of, what do we do with it? What can we do with this rudimentary multimedia product? And so we looked at talking kids' books, we looked at putting sort of narration, navigation stuff on websites. We had a number of things, and then it was, I think it was the late 97, 98, I stood up at a conference. It was San Francisco, British Institute of Business or something in San Francisco conference. They did an event in Waterloo, and there were 500 delegates. And I stood up and showed examples of multimedia on the internet. And Sony Entertainment were there, and DoubleClick were there, and a few other people were there. And the solutions that created the most excitement were the multimedia advertising. We were talking about rich media. This is in mid-late 90s. So we were saying, this is rich media, this multimedia in internet advertising. And based on that reaction, we then decided to become an ad tech. We had no idea what ad tech was. I still haven't a clue what it is, but then we decided to become an ad tech business.
Wow. How was it for you, Pierre?
Yeah, it was, I came from sort of print and magazine media, so selling print and magazine, actually in Switzerland back then. And it was around sort of 96, 97, I started to kind of obviously read more about the internet, and, moved to London, joined Real Media, which was, one of the first kind of ad tech,
you joined Real Media
first, and online sales house, very early days, competing with the likes of kind of DoubleClick. And that was kind of really exciting because you felt like it was something new kind of going on. And obviously, we went through kind of ups and downs, obviously in the early kind of 2000s when we all thought, we're going to be rich, and then from one day to another, there's no money left anymore. So that was crazy. But and then, I spent sort of like 9 years there, and then moved to kind of Blue Lithium, which was one of the first kind of behavioral ad network. So that's when we started to kind of use kind of data to target kind of users based on their interest and their intent. Retargeting was already there back in those days, up until the sort of late 2000s, when I kind of discovered real-time bidding, not programmatic, because programmatic came after a few years. And that was kind of a moment in time where I felt like, it's like in the late 90s, you felt like there's something going on here. And in the late 2000s, at least for me, it was suddenly kind of a shift in terms of how you're buying and selling ads, and that was definitely kind of a revelation, and I wanted to be part of it. So then, that's how I got into what is called kind of now programmatic. So yeah, I think I'm on my 24th year in ad tech, which says a lot about my age.
But how did you figure that out? I mean, even when I joined the movement, or actually when I was at Google, well, when I was DoubleClick, we acquired you guys. Rich media was the big thing because that was lucrative for the tech companies at that time as well. And then with the acquisition of Invite Media, we said, what is RTV? And then it was 2009 or 2010, I think, and you were already 2 years ahead. You guys, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the time I was part of Yahoo, obviously, who acquired kind of Blue Lithium, but also acquired kind of Ride Media, which was one of the first exchanges where you had advertisers and publishers. It wasn't RTB yet, but it was an auction model. And then you started to hear that there was something going on. Obviously, a lot of companies came from the US, and for me, I still remember, reading about the ability to actually buy an impression in real time, and I said, what do you mean buying in real time? Remember that back in those days, it was dominated by, a lot of obviously, the ad networks, the advertising.com, the specific media. Everything was done on an IO basis. So you would actually hand over, you got a booking for 20, 30, 40, whatever. And then you run this kind of through the publisher ad server. Yes, there was kind of third-party ad servers available, but, everything was controlled by the publisher ad server. And suddenly the ability to say, oh, I can have a technology that allows me to actually buy impressions in real time and choose which impression I want to buy based on, targeting criteria, based on reaching the audiences I want to reach, and only buy those impressions, was absolutely revolutionary. And so I read about this and I said, I want to be part of this.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. Was it similar for you? I mean, you sold Tango Zebra in 2007, right? That's when I joined DoubleClick, and then what happened then? Because we met, we had a meet and greet, and then you said goodbye. And then
I did. Tango Zebra got bought, and I think at that point I'd been an 11-year journey, and I was pretty sure that I didn't want to continue my relationship with ad tech at that particular point, and I'd written a really rubbish business plan that had hidden away in a drawer, and the nub of it was that content was going to become a key marketing product, approach, because what was going on back then, 2007, we had social media, the explosion of social media, which meant that the audiences were starting to put their thumbs down as much as their thumb. They were doing that or that, so brands didn't know how to interface. So Daz couldn't suddenly say we're whiter than white, because all around the world people would say no, you're not, and it created that two-way discussion that the internet hadn't seen before. And suddenly you had the big online publishers who were losing audiences at lunchtime. So rather than us going to magazine.com or newspaper.com or whatever we liked in our lunch breaks.com, we would be on the MySpace, Facebook, whatever it might be. And publishers were losing audiences. So for me, there was this sort of dynamic. I thought, well, if we could start creating super relevant short form content for brands and then align that with publishers' interests, so the publishers would sort of lead it editorially and then we would deliver it, then that could be an interesting thing, and that could help solve some of the challenges that brands were seeing at that point. So I created a business called Rockerbox with my partner then, business partner then, Tori Chilcott, who'd come out of a TV world, and we played around with short form content, but delivering that short form content into anywhere in any meaningful way was challenging. I think ostensibly we were too early in the whole scheme of things. But so I worked on this video concept, an interactive video concept. I pulled a network of publishers together. It was very much about distributing content via ad units. How do you repurpose an ad unit and use the tracking that you have in an ad environment and deliver content? And it was working really well. And then I spent a lot of time in the US talking to the Programmatic guys. Programmatic was there, this man, for example. Programmatic was everywhere. And that whole bury your head in the sand thing, I looked at it and I could see it coming out of the, it was becoming such a big machine, and I was slightly hoping it was going to go away, because we'd built this network. It was performing really well. So, oh God, we've got to go through yet another reinvention. And then I went off to, I spent a lot of time in New York, and I won't name them, but I went to see.
You can name them, yes, fine.
Yeah, well, it'd be inappropriate. But I went to see the big guys in programmatic. So you think about who the big guys in programmatic were back then. And I had meetings with them, and I showed them, a bit like a sales guy, and I got my laptop out, and I showed them this multimedia content with all of this interactivity. It was rich media. It was, you know, full-on rich media stuff. And I said, I want to be able to do this programmatically. How do we do it programmatically? And they laughed me out of the room. I genuinely laughed me out of the room and said, you clearly don't understand online advertising. Programmatic will never be about branding. So I went back, and that's when we started. That's when we, as a business, pivoted into our objective was solving the challenges around creativity for programmatic, and that was the trigger for me.
You built Turn, basically, in Europe. Yeah, you understood that programmatic is obviously starting to be a thing in Europe. How was that? I mean, you heard about Turn, or how did this work?
Yeah, I mean, the way I came across them because I was kind of reading a lot in terms of what was going on in the US, and you know, I think it was Ad Exchange was there already, and there was more and more articles about what you know, DSPs and SSPs, you know, all these kind of new acronyms. And there was a friend, an ex-colleague of mine, I was a Blue Lithium, Tim Mormon, who used to work there. And then I just got in touch with him. I said, you know, I want to be, you know, want to be part of it. I want to help you kind of deploy Turn across Europe, and you know, just develop business. And then it happened. And you know, in those days it was all very new. And
I didn't get it.
You know, it was super new, and it was, you know, hiring was kind of a challenge because, you know, it's not like you could find people that had kind of experience who worked in programmatic before. So it was very much about, okay, you know, find people who had an understanding of kind of digital advertising, probably had some kind of ad network type of background, understood kind of, you know, audience targeting, and really kind of started from there. And in those days, we were competing with the likes of MediaMath, AppNexus, Invite Media, even before they got acquired by Google. When they did acquire them, it took a few years for them to actually build something, but it was absolutely exhilarating because we could see the you know, started around 2011, and it started from a small base, but it was like it went, you know, through the roof really quickly, because you could see you know, obviously agencies started to establish kind of trading desk, and month after month you could see kind of new advertisers coming on board and starting to actually increase their budget. And often, you know, their budgets would come from ad networks, but it was exhilarating.
So, I mean, the interest from the agency side using programmatic, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you know, especially the big agency networks, agency holding groups, things were already happening kind of in the US. And then you saw, obviously, the likes of Vivaki or, you know, Amnet or Cadron with you, Hossein, that, you know, started off in the US, and then UK and other markets started to kind of adopt, you know, DSPs to start kind of running campaigns, and then, you know, slowly also kind of the independents came on board. So it was just amazing because, you know, all of a sudden you started to see more and more budgets shifting towards programmatic.
Talent was a big thing. Did you know he tried to hire me, and then I went
Did
to...
he?
Yes.
That explains a lot.
Biggest mistake. And then I called him one day from Kedron, and it was
I'm
quite fun.
now.
Yes, like, you have to be nice to me. So that was, I mean, talent. Yeah. I mean, how do you deal with that as well? I mean, with your, I know how you were struggling. I remember because, you know, we just started to become friends. How do you, like, with all these new ideas? You mentioned this business plan you had, getting talent into this new thing, because I remember nobody knew anything really about the programmatic RTB landscape at that time, right?
I mean, I think I was lucky in that I was able to dip into the Tango Zebra team.
Yeah.
My brother's CTO at Tango Zebra, CTO at Scoota, and he's got, he's like me, he's 25, 26 years in the business, and he has a very, very deep technical knowledge of ad tech. I mean, he created a lot of the early rich media forms, and so we took a very sort of pragmatic technical view at it. We looked at the platforms, we had logins, and we played around. And for us, it was about taking a bit of time to try and determine what we were trying to build. And so we didn't need to staff up a lot. In the early stages, I was funding everything, and until we then started to raise some money. So we were going pretty gently. We had a production side to the business, and that was really, that was the business, and we were fiddling with technology to try and solve how to make creative work at scale. So I think it was an organic thing. The programmatic machine was evolving. We were, bending Pierre's ear every now and then for advice and to try and get a good understanding, because like you think, well, what is it? What is this machine? It's just so new and so different.
I mean, you say organically. I know you were just, you had the budget. You had to find the people, right, in a short amount of time.
I think hiring and retaining people is the one of the hardest things, and I think it's a big challenge that we have in our industry. I think that we I've lived through, I've experienced this kind of firsthand about you do basic onboarding, but then it's just like off you go, and you jump in the water, you have to swim from day one. And I think this is a problem because over time, I think so we have, I mean, any company should actually invest more in training to kind of make sure that you can retain. Because as long as, if you're in any company, as long as you feel like you're learning, okay, it makes sense. I mean, obviously there are other things that matter, but the minute you feel like you're not learning anymore, that's when you're gonna start to look elsewhere.
I remember with Naggar Zebra in the days when we were scaling rapidly. Yeah. And recruiting was difficult because the whole industry was scaling rapidly. And in the end, we found actually going out and getting really bright grads who had come out of business school. Most of them spoke 3 or 4 European languages, and we would bring them in, and they came without too much baggage, and they learned unbelievably quickly, and they ended up being extraordinarily effective and it really helped the concept of sort of growing the team from the base and evolving. In fact, I look at what those guys are doing now, and it's they're all in big jobs. But I think nowadays certainly there's enough. We've all been buried in the machine long enough to know the type of people that we're looking for. But I think the recipe's the same. People who are super bright, really keen, have a great appetite for it, and actually they don't need to have too much, prior knowledge to be effective.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time in this industry where we were looking for people who understand programmatic, which was not existent, and I see now more and more agencies and tech companies going to the universities and try to like what you did, right? Like fish them right straight after uni when they graduated and try to, I would say, they're not damaged goods yet. So, and train them from the start. Yeah. It's getting a trend, especially trying to get the loyalty sense in, and like as you said, training. If they don't learn, yeah, you're right, they leave at some point.
The other thing is innovation. I mean, if you're part of a company that is building something new and it's exciting, and you, James, you've done a lot then in terms of rich media. For, when it comes to programmatic, sometimes we forget about the importance of kind of creatives, but at the same time, I feel like we are in an industry that is continuously trying to build something new. Sometimes, we get ahead of ourselves, but that's really what makes it, super exciting, especially for people who want to get on board. I think they, there's so many companies out there trying to innovate, coming up with kind of new solutions, because there's always a problem to solve. There's always there's some kind of challenge. And obviously technology helps to kind of solve a lot of the problems that companies are experiencing in terms of kind of automation and creativity and all the.
Do you agree we always focus on one extreme? It's like, because like, and when it was programmatic in the beginning, it was pure performance and delivery. And then a couple of years later, we figured out, oh, no, we need branding as well. And then now it's all about experience, which puts the layers up, you know, with the maturity of our business, all these channels grow together. But we always go, you know, I had this quote I read this morning, I had to laugh. One global executive at the agency wasn't mentioned in the programmatic field wrote, 50% of my discussions today are sustainability, and the other 50% are attention. Right? So, you know, before that, there was fraud, brand safety, inventory, education, talent, you know, and talent now we split into 3 factors as well, which is, you know, talent itself, knowledge and experience, right? And we, don't we always go to one extreme? What's the next extreme? Now sustainability, what do you guys think of that? It's like, is there any room in terms of how we can improve the experience in advertising?
Well, I think we have to. You know, my personal opinion is that if I look at programmatic and if I look at the performance of programmatic, it doesn't tell a story of success in the 0.0 whatever it is that we might see as an average. That doesn't, for me, describe an audience that's engaged with a brand.
Yeah.
And as an industry, we've become obsessed with. I think part of the problem is that ad tech educates the industry, and we're guilty of that. We've all been guilty of it. Ad tech will educate the industry, and ad tech comes to market with a solution that it wants to be adopted. And if ad tech is extremely well funded, then it can get that solution adopted because it can, you know, T&E budgets will allow, will allow an audience to happen, and if there's a story there. So if you think about some of the things that are happening in programmatic, we still chase people around the web until they can't stand the brand anymore, and we still look at that as though that's some measure of success.
Yeah.
You know, the overutilization or exploitation of data. Creativity has not managed to find a really true home in programmatic. If you think back to the old days when we were, you know, with early rich media stuff, creative agencies were involved. Flash was the canvas, so it was part of what they did.
Oh, was it Flash?
Yeah, no,
well,
Flash.
in advertising, yeah.
Yeah, it was Flash, yeah. So
I learned lingo, so I don't know if you remember
yeah,
that.
lingo. But so the creative agencies were used to using the toolkits. They were coming up with creative solutions that were designed for the environment. They were conceptualizing these wonderful. And I remember I've got a hard drive somewhere with some unbelievably interesting creative examples that were happening in, you know, 2000, 2003, 5, 6, 7, or whatever. And then when Flash fell away in 2011, when the iPad was launched without support for it and everything went HTML5, the creative agencies sort of looked at that and went, well, we're not programmers, we can't code that stuff. And then Programmatic came along, introducing a dynamic when you can't deliver untested JavaScript-based formats on the end of a bid. You know, the Programmatic was all about responding to a bid in real time because of the rules set by the DSP and the SSP and presented by the SSP. Great if your format's static or single file video, but if it's a multimedia experience that's knitted together with JavaScript and you have to pre-test that JavaScript, you're sort of scuppered because you can't respond to a bid with untested JavaScript. So we haven't solved that creative issue yet as an industry, which is why we spent so many years working on that core. So how do you make creativity, unrestricted creativity, work at very real scale? And we have so many case studies that demonstrate. I mean, our benchmark starter for 10 is about 25 times the performance averages, and we're disappointed if we're below that. And it's not unusual to be hitting 50 times the averages.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No,
I don't know what's going on.
50 times the averages, because the creativity can, if you blend the right level of right type of creativity with the right contextual triggers, and then you can make it work. So I'm looking forward to all of that stuff happening.
Well, it has to at some point, right? We just talked too long about it. I mean, I remember I remember the times of rich media. I mean, with your current company, you're trying to solve this, I assume?
Yeah, with Scoota, we spent a couple of years solely spent a couple of years solely on solving how to get JavaScript into an untested environment at scale, so that you could not be restricted in where you went with that creative. And then we built a bidder, and the bidder was built with an AI in it that, rather than thinking about cookies, so we built a cookie-free bidder from the word go. Not because we were visionary at all. It was because our creative could do so many things. You could have so many points of engagement. What we didn't want to be doing was dropping a cookie at every point, every moment on a video, every interaction, every brochure download, because you end up with a basket full of chaos. And so we built a bidder that was all about creative KPIs against the environmental factors. So it would optimize based on how that creative was performing against context, keyword, or whatever. And so that's part of trying to solve those challenges. And it's taken a long time. It has taken a long time, but it works.
It works, right? I mean,
it works.
Pierre, you were, I mean, crazy is not the right word, but you went to a niche product, right? After running Programmatic, you went to content side, and you're educating the market. I'm pretty sure still educating the market. You launched Turn, and then you went to a company that was just purely focusing on audio, which was not even an American company, which was a European company.
Yeah, I mean, it was after working for only kind of US companies, but it was, I think this is, again, going back to, I mean, programmatic has become like a multi-billion industry now. When I started, it was just purely, it was display, and it was like inventory that, publishers couldn't sell directly. So they would put that onto this kind of, this open exchange, open marketplace to, and then if you fast forward, now you've got emerging channels, you've got, digital out of home. Obviously, we're talking a lot about connected TV, and of course, digital audio and podcasting, which is, I think it's great. And that's because companies slowly, realize that, okay, let's start with display, let's move on to kind of video native and all the other formats that can actually be transacted programmatically. When I started AdsWiz, there was no programmatic infrastructure. And we've sort of built kind of both kind of DSPs and SSPs to enable kind of that. And then after 7 years, it's pretty established with DSPs and SSPs with transacting. And I think that's the great thing. At the same time, I feel like as an industry, we still have a number of issues that we need to solve. And sometimes we get ahead of ourselves and talk about the kind of next big thing, when in fact, we still have challenges.
We do this all the time. I'm sorry.
we still have challenges around, things like, fraud and brand safety, transparency. And by the way, these problems already existed, pre-programmatic, because back in the days of the ad networks, there were a lot of issues around, brand safety, and we still have not solved that. There's transparency, financial transparency. There's issues around payments where, the supply chain is so long, then there's so many players in there that it takes ages if you're a publisher to actually get paid. There's a problem around reconciliation, and I think there are solutions around that, technology based, around like things like blockchain, for example, that can help solve that. But I think as an industry, we really need to regulate ourselves, because otherwise there will be others will try to regulate us. Especially now as it's there's so much money going kind of through it, but I feel like it's taken too long to kind of solve these problems, and it's at the same time it's great to talk about what's going to come next, but I think that's really something that we need to fix.
I mean, don't you think that we generate more and more problems in terms of like if we go beyond now audio, for example, now CTV, in-game advertising, the metaverse, on top of all the problems we have, the industry overall globally, let's not only talk digital now, is going close to $1 trillion in spend, and half of that is digital. And where is this all headed? I mean, these problems are not going away. Talent is definitely an issue. Merging all these channels and planning them right. Do you think we can only solve that with a partner like an agency, for example, to delegate
I
different
think,
tech?
yeah, I think it's a course of maturity, and I remember it in the programmatic.
We're in the maturity phase now for 20 years.
Yeah, it takes a long time. So it's the vested interests that you've got to overcome, because you have, as I mentioned earlier, you have ad tech with a vested interest that ad tech wants to raise some money, scale, and exit, and that's a priority. And technology for technology's sake is a problem, because you will forever have technologists who are trying to layer technology on technology to squeeze 0.02 to 0.03 and have a case there. If we look at the other medium, the other media channels, advertising is actually, in a lot of instances, is welcomed. People are okay with it on telly, they like it in magazines. What we haven't done in digital advertising is arrive at a solution that is pleasant for all of the stakeholders. It's much better in out of home, and we do a hell of a lot with out of home, which is DCO and creative, and that's technology led. But actually, it's a one-to-many broadcast medium, and so it's much less of a personal interruption compared with classic digital advertising, online advertising. And I think online advertising could and should get there. It can get there, but it needs to have a different view. And I think the demise of the third-party cookie will change the focus on data. I'm hoping that context and creativity moving to the forefront of the medium will allow us to think a little bit more about the consumer's experience, so that we are putting them first. We see, interestingly enough, the best performing environments for programmatic display that we bump into are the long tail lifestyle passion environments. Where you have a cycling or a photography or whatever it might be, where end users are actually in a much more receptive mindset than they might be at lunchtime looking at the news at a newspaper.
Yeah.
I think we've just got to go through a period of experimentation post the demise of the cookie, because programmatic's been all about data, it's been all about retargeting, it's all about performance, and it's depressing to see the effectiveness curve and what's happened over the years. But the solution's there. We can definitely get to it.
I mean, I think content is definitely, at the forefront. I mean, there's an explosion of content in all kind of channels, and it's not just kind of social media. I see, for example, in podcasts, you've got over 2 million shows. It's growing 20% year over year, 50 million episodes. Everyone is creating, it's great content. I guess the challenge, for a brand is that there's a massive fragmentation, and how do we solve for this, for this fragmentation? How do you find this content? It's not necessarily, the most popular podcast shows, because there's great content outside of that, and it's just how do you identify, how do you reach it, how do you discover it? And again, I think technology can help there. And that's why I'm, even with the challenges around kind of identity, I'm very confident that as an industry, we've always demonstrated that there's a problem. Okay, here is the solution. It's going to take time. And I think even you hear about, there's a lot of people coming with solutions around identity. I don't think there's really kind of a solution out there that is really solving the problem, but there are different things out there that can help mitigate the problem that we're seeing with deprecation of third-party cookies and the ATT framework. So I'm confident there, but I think that we need to, technology is going to help with, is going to help solving some of the issues that we're seeing now.
How do you see the time frame of that? I mean, when you mentioned identity, and context is a great example as well, because context is old school, kind of, like evolved as old school. Yeah. Now we have over 80 identity players globally. So, they're probably going to come an extra 20 on top. But, we see a new opportunity to squeeze something into our business, and I think it's still good because it pushes and forces everybody to evolve, and competition is never bad at some point. But I know then I will need there's a time period where it needs to consolidate, right? That's what happened with any solution in our business. We have many of them. Then with the cookie gone one day, uh, don't you think we should have learned? I mean, obviously things like TCF, explain this to clients or to brands, didn't play the way we wanted it to play. If we look from a GDPR perspective, but shouldn't we collaborate closer together to solve these problems instead of just saying, oh, I have the best solution, I have the best solution, I have the best solution?
Yeah, I think that it's a really difficult one. And Pierre's point on technology will find the solution. I absolutely agree with that, because we are operating in a, by virtue of the fact that the internet is a technical interactive medium, it requires a technological solution. I think that part of the challenge is that there remains at the moment a lot of vested interest and energy in this construct of systems. If you think of programmatic, most programmatic systems think about a data point, think about a user ID, whether it's a universal ID or a cookie or something. They need that point. It's how they're built, it's what they measure. And I think we have to work through that. And I think as third-party cookie goes, contextual targeting, in whatever shape and form that ends up looking, I mean, I see that as quite a fluid thing. Creativity, I'm naturally going to say that because it's everything I've done for the last 25 years, but creativity needs a leg up. It really does need a helping hand. And I think we as an industry need to start to believe that the combination of creativity and context can find an audience we refer to them as organic audiences, rather than being obsessed with a data-driven trail. I liken to, I remember when I was living in Northcote Road in some people call it Clapham, some people call it Battersea. But there'd be a Saturday morning I'd go out for a newspaper, and I'd come back with baguettes and cheese or whatever. The French market would be there every 6 weeks, and I would never remember. But I would go out and I would stumble into this French market, and I would come back with all sorts of stuff, because the experience was alluring. It was an attractive experience, and it was an organic response from my perspective. And we have, I mean, in our data, in our DMP, we've got over 1 trillion data points that describe how people are responding to in that organic moment. When the creativity blends nicely with the context, and actually the creative experience is an alluring one. And I am looking forward to a time when the industry feels courageous enough to actually test that stuff properly, because I think it'll be surprising what we actually end up seeing.
So the industry is more willing to test and learn right now, because I remember when we worked together, Programmatic was on everything became static. This is the blueprint. This is what you need to work with.
Yeah, 100%.
Are we testing again? Are they more willing? I mean, audio was definitely.
Yeah. I think we're now in this kind of testing phase of where there are kind of different solutions where, universal IDs. There's obviously contextual. There's people first party first party data, and but I think that people don't know yet how scalable these solutions are in isolation. So that's why they need to test a combination of these things and realize what is kind of best for their business. But I think it's going to take at least another 18-24 months before we get there. I think the other thing is that we also need to look at how we measure the effectiveness of advertising. It's just not obviously going to be based just on on cookies anymore, but it's so we're going to have to look at different metrics. Of the attention is one of them, and completely kind of revisit the way we evaluate if campaign worked or not. So I think that's going to happen in parallel.
Well, in general, my point of view was, like, what does a brand want? More sales, right? At some point. But on the other hand, well, as much as the measurement is, well, outdated, it's the wrong word, but needs to evolve to the next level. Without that measurement, we wouldn't have programmatic today. Let's be honest, right? Because it was this new thing. There was not enough inventory. There was not enough data. Was the only way to justify it.
Mm.
You know, which I'm gonna get a lot of trouble with saying that. So, but you guys. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur spotting the things, early stage. What advice would you give these kids today who want to reinvent the world all over? Because it's overflown. We have almost 9,000 players in this game now. Not only programmatic, but marketing tech. How much more do we need? No?
Yeah,
It's an unfair question. I'm sorry.
No, it's a good question because I think it's a very, very, very real question. It's ballistically difficult at times. Yeah. And I think it also depends where you're doing it. I remember in the early days of Tango Zebra, we were sitting in a barn in Gloucestershire looking at multimedia on the internet, and it was working, and we had zero bandwidth. I mean, 24K modem, 28K modem, whatever. And I remember sitting there thinking, what's the point? If we're doing this in a barn in Gloucestershire, then there must be hundreds of people in the US doing this stuff. There must be thousands of people doing this. And we didn't see them, and then we didn't see them, and we didn't see them, and we ended up finding ourselves in a situation where we were quite surprised that yet we still hadn't seen them, and they didn't come along. And I think in the UK, what we have learnt to be possibly better at, I don't know, but it takes a long time in the UK not always, but quite often it takes longer in the UK to build a tech business because you are up against the very well-funded US businesses who come into market.
And that's your point from the UK, right? Let's take Germany, France, Italy.
So with Tango Zebra, it was an 11-year journey. Scoota's been, we've pivoted, but it's longer. And I think part of the challenge is how you go about raising money, what you do with a startup. Do you go pure tech and try and raise? Do you become a consultant? Do you create an agency model and then build tech within that? I think, if I were young and doing it, I'd absolutely do it again. Because to not do it, if you've got a feeling for doing it, you have to do it. You can't not do it. You've just got to be prepared for what will be a bonkers journey. It can be horrific, but it can be, incredibly rewarding on numerous levels. Not just technology. When you build technology and you see it works, it solves problems, and people adopt it, and all of that's great fun. But it's people. For me, it's the people. When you start building teams and those teams are your business. They're the guys that make the stuff happen. I think about the team that we've got at Scoota at the moment. The average tenure is certainly 6 years. People are there and they are deeply involved in what we're doing and what we're building. And that is the thing that I think gives most energy if you can get the right people.
If you get the right people, how was that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure they would listen. Actually, I take my daughters. Sometimes it's just like interestingly, I was spending time with understand because they play games like Roblox and Minecraft, which are very much at the base of what is going on with the metaverse, and I was trying to understand exactly what are you doing there, because I was reading about NFTs and I said, what is it? And I'm naturally kind of curious and I want to know about the thing. But I think I think often they know what they want to do. But if I could sort of make kind of sort of recommendations, just like do kind of your own research. I mean, there's definitely a lot going on in our industry. I think there's I know it's not always easy to kind of find the sort of people actually funding money and all that stuff, but I think there's you can get in there if you've got a good idea, if you've got someone who's knows how to code, and there's so many problems that actually need to be solved, whether it's on the sales side or on on the buy side, it's not just about ads, it's also about kind of content and, creativity as well. I think there's it's really kind of an exciting industry. There's so much going on. So, if you're interested, do your own research and just, jump on board.
I had this conversation with this company in Web 3.0, and when he explained to me what they do, first of all, I didn't get it right away, to be honest with you. But then, it reminded me like to 20 years ago, you would just put an idea on a piece of paper and then you would go to an investor and say, yeah, here's your money. And that's what's happening right now. It's in experimental mode right now. So just try it out and do your research, and then if it works out, I mean, there's definitely room for
Yeah, and
advertising.
it's, if you read about it, it's not about, people say it's not about just sticking banners. It's like on games. I mean, it's okay. That's very much like, the internet today. It's more about kind of creating experiences. The thing is that, what kind of experience do you create? What kind of audiences are you trying to reach? How do you want to interact with them? That's really the difficult part. And I think, yeah, as you said, I mean, it's, people are experimenting with it. Is it going to be the future of the internet, as they say? I mean, I don't know.
Well, if you project 100 years and 100 years and imagine the sorts of experiences that consumers will have with brands in what sort of media environment, and they are going to be fundamentally different to what they are today, and we've got to get on that journey. So those developments,
Well,
is an extension of everything that we're doing.
Ideally, consumers understand the value of, every engagement generates data, and they want the value back for it, right? There are researchers who, like, yes, there's the way to the metaverse, but there's a way out as well, which, first attempts were Google Glass. Apple's going to work on something. So you bring the augmented reality into the real world, where any engagement, imagine that's a huge new ball game for advertising. You're gonna get over advertised at some point, over stressing, and the human mindset, getting them into an addictive mode, because you get value back. If if you earn points or money, whatever, with that, people will go through the virtual world and do whatever they need to do just to, get something out of it. Right? And it's, for me, it's going all in that direction. In 100 years, luckily, my head is frozen somewhere, and they're gonna attach it back, or, or I'm gonna upload my. I mean, I won't see it, but you're right. I mean, we are in the forefront of pushing the consumer experience in the forefront. So I assume you guys are gonna stay in advertising. You still like it?
It's
You said you wanted to get out, right? After the
in 2007,
Yeah.
I thought that was 11 years of ad tech.
Yeah.
I want to do something creative. Let's do content. And then I slid back into ad tech, and I'm in ad tech. But it's, I'm excited about my world at the moment is exciting, because we're seeing a lot going on in the US. We're seeing the creativity and context becoming important, and so it's back to your point about our people testing. We're seeing a quite considerable shift in that type of dynamic that that we interface with, and so that's exciting. If you're busy and doing stuff, and you get a sense of things moving, then it becomes really exciting. I personally find ad tech, for the sake of ad tech, quite, it's too dry for me. The data stuff, the programmatic stuff, it's a means to an end. The bits that excite me are the experiential stuff, the creativity, the solving problems. I think is good, but I'm still in it at the moment.
I mean, it's very interesting, right? It's like, because your generation and parts of my generation, because when you didn't need a degree really to get into this business, which changed in the last decade immensely with Google, and everyone needed a degree to this and that. Come from the music industry. You're a musician.
Yeah,
You're a musician. I was a musician, and it was quite interesting. And like, creativity is definitely one bit that is why I got into Rich Media in the first place. And then audio, I mean, when you went into the audio sector, I thought it was very interesting because it's non-intrusive kind of, right? It's interesting for the gaming industry, and where it's headed. It's a huge business, undermined for so many years.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting what's happening with, obviously audio is all about kind of the voice and the impact it has, and how voice is actually being used, in different ways, not just for advertising, but also, like voice assistants. You can do everything in using your voice in your car, at home, to kind of activate stuff, and I think this is, it's going to have a kind of a huge kind of impact in the coming years, how it's going to be used, for example, in the metaverse as well. We're used to kind of use our keyboards to do anything. If we want to order something, if we want to go online, write an email. I think more and more we're going to be using our voice moving forward. So I think I agree that, creativity has been, it hasn't kind of reached the place it should have when it comes particularly to kind of programmatic, when in fact, creative plays a huge role in the success of a campaign. And because we've been too focused on the tech side, as you said, on the data and the targeting and reaching the users, but at the end of the day, it's the message is really what is going to make a campaign work or not. So I think that there should we should find a kind of a rebalance things and make sure that we spend enough time building creatives that really are relevant to people.
Yeah, and to the right generation, right? So I think so. The session comes to an end. I mean, it's really rare. I mean, all the show is really new to have such masterminds in the show coming. Brilliant guys. Yeah, I know Pierre. I know you for 12 years. I know you for 15 years now, and always been part of my life and helping, advising me to do the right decisions. So thank you for coming very
Pleasure.
much, and
Thank you.
sharing your
It's great.
experience, how
Thanks
you
for
got
having
into this business that obviously has a future. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there anymore. And the advice you give to anybody who wants to build a company or wants to launch a company, in Europe, coming from somewhere else. We know it's never easy, but if you have the right passion and, as you said, the right people, you can achieve anything. So thank you guys for looking at the stream with these two brilliant guys, Pierre and James, coming here to hang out with me. Although it's very sunny outside, I guess we're going to go out, have a coffee, and I see you in the next session. Thank you very much.